Welcome to Short Course, episode 133 for August 29th, 2024. I'm your host, Ben Barry. Thank you for bearing with me on this long hiatus between episodes. This is the first episode since the successful execution of the 2024 Area 6 Championship, so I will be talking about that mostly today. As you can imagine, leading up to that in the final weeks, the amount of time that we were putting into it, both myself and my wife, Stephanie, who is also now getting ready to run the North Carolina section match, which she's the North Carolina section coordinator. But for Area 6, she was handling all of the logistics around staffing, making sure everything was getting to the range at the right time, basically anything not directly related to rules or stages. So we kind of had that split. And so between the two of us, we were fairly busy leading up to the match. So that was one of the contributing factors to the lack of podcasting in the last few weeks. And I'm sure I'll be talking about the Area 6 match for at least one more episode after this and, on an ongoing basis from here on out. Because, without a doubt, this was certainly the biggest match that I've personally been involved with, and also, the highest level of involvement in a match like this that I've had. So I think there are a lot of interesting stories to be told, certainly some lessons learned. I've been keeping a list of those, which I'll do in a subsequent episode, either next week or whenever I get a chance to record the next episode. But for this week, I just wanted to talk about some high-level information about the match, talk about some things that went well, because, it's always fun to celebrate the things that came down in your favor, talk about how I shot at the match, and then finish with a quick update on just how things are going with the board, and to just generally ease back into podcasting rather than dropping a 90-minute omnibus on you. I'll hit some of the high points and keep talking about this for as long as I have anything interesting to say about it. So certainly if you were there at the match, or if you've seen anything about the match, shoot me an email. Let me know what you thought. Let me know from your perspective what you saw. It feels like it should go without saying, but I routinely found myself just being amazed during the match, just how much was going on, sort of being handled through the various, levels of the chain of command, right? You have the ROs and the CROs and the RMs, and you've got your stats guys doing their thing. You've got the quartermasters doing their thing. And there was a ton of stuff going on at the match, and I was aware of much of it, but it was very impressive to me, and also in a way strange that, I was in theory in charge of this match, and yet there's so many things just being handled, and perhaps I would only even know about it after it was resolved. So it was an interesting experience. And like I said, I'm curious what the perspective by the folks that got to shoot it was. So certainly I'd love to hear from you about what you thought, what was good, what could be better. And obviously that can fuel more discussions and more podcasts. I have no illusions that the match was perfect. There certainly, like I said, there are lessons learned that I'll talk about later. And I think the more we can talk about these things, the more I can talk about the things that didn't go perfectly, the more hopefully people can learn from that experience and make their matches better. So I don't have any ego tied up in this. I'm not trying to paint it as some perfect out of the park home run, but I do feel like it went as well as I could have hoped for. And I'll get to some of that in the what went well section. But just to set the scene a little bit, it's worth talking about where the match was and why. And certainly the decision to host it at Belton Gun Club in Belton, South Carolina, that was a decision made back in February or March, when basically it was clear that, okay, I'm actually probably going to get to stay on the board. Bear in mind, in December, right before my term started, they kicked Scott out. And then at my first meeting, they tried to kick Frank out. And so I was kind of wondering how much effort to put into planning an area match, because I didn't know if I'd actually be area director in August. Well, I am. And so here we are. And originally, this being the South, we'd wanted to put it in September or October, but when the decision was made to have it at Belton, and that was mostly just because I knew I had had good interactions with the club president and the USPSA match director there, Todd Holmes. And I knew that he was hardworking. He had a great crew. He had a great facility. They had the bays to do it. They had the walls and the props and the fault lines to do it. And he was on board. He was willing to help, but with the proviso that he was kind of the boots on the ground guy, but that I was the match director. It was my responsibility to coordinate everything and order all the supplies and all that. And so that's what we did. And unfortunately, we ended up having to go into August just because that area is close to Clemson, and Clemson, there were basically 2 weekends that we could have picked in September or October between the September Handgun Nationals and the October Open PCC Nationals. And wouldn't you know it, there was a Clemson home football game on both of them back to back. So that forced our hand in terms of going earlier all the way into August, and that ended up working out. But that was how it ended up at the end of August at Belton. Is, I was coming in as an area director, and I kind of had to make this call of who do I know that I think can deliver this match with the highest probability of success. And Todd and his crew were absolutely there, and they absolutely came through. And I couldn't be prouder of that decision. So the schedule for us as a family was that on Saturday, so the match ran, the main match ran Friday through Sunday. And the Saturday before that Friday, we loaded up the van and drove down with both kids, Steph and myself, and got settled into the Airbnb that we'd rented for the week. And originally the plan was this, going back months when we had decided to take on this match, the thought was that we would be able to leave the kids with Steph's mother, who had watched the kids overnight for a couple of consecutive nights in the past, and she was willing to. But as those of you that have listened previously know, she suffered a pretty severe stroke back in April, and she is still in a nursing home, still almost completely disabled by that. And so any hope of her being able to watch the kids was not in the cards. Obviously, there's a whole host of other challenges facing her and us and her family around that situation, and not being able to babysit our kids is one tiny corner of it. But that was the original thought when we figured, okay, we're going to have to go to Belton for a week to put on this match, was, okay, we have family who can help. As it was, we've since brought in an au pair, actually, who is now watching the kids during the day, which her mom used to do. And the au pair came with us. She actually ended up watching the kids at the Airbnb for most of the week while we were at the match. And so that was what we had to do to make it work. It was certainly not ideal. I can't see us planning for that same arrangement next year, but given that we had committed to run this match, and it really wasn't feasible to try and find somebody to foist all the match directing responsibilities onto at this point, we rolled with it, and it worked. It was not ideal, but it worked. So Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday were our designated stage build days. Now, the goal was to get 6 stages built Sunday, 6 stages built Monday, and then spend Tuesday debugging, rigging activators, doing RM walkthroughs, and just debugging the stages. And that pretty much went according to plan. The build day on Sunday was an interesting experience. It started really slowly just because there was so much hauling of props around the range. The one major downside to Belton is they have great bays, and we were able to do a lot with them, but they're very spread out. And in particular, all of their props are all the way at one end of the range. And so we had one flatbed truck and one trailer, and we were just doing runs back and forth, distributing props to the far bays for most of Sunday. And then we had a ton of local help, a lot of folks that work during the week, but they're used to doing a Sunday setup for a Saturday match. And so a lot of them came out. And so even with having to distribute all those props, we got 6 stages knocked out on Sunday. Monday was a bit more of a grind. We had a smaller crew. We didn't have as far to move each prop, but everybody that was there pretty much was had already spent a day on the range, so we were starting to slow down a little bit, but we got through it on Monday. And then Tuesday was punch list and rigging the activators and figuring out how to make sure that, the steel was all at minimum safe distance and that the targets were hidden before activation, but visible at rest, all of those kinds of things. And that was a marathon day as well, but definitely it was sort of lower intensity. A lot of the stage building was obviously very physically intense, but the actual debugging day was more kind of walking around and looking at things and saying, okay, how do we fix this problem? And then thinking for 5 minutes and moving something around. And so it was less physically demanding, but it was definitely more of a long day. But originally, Steph and I had planned to shoot with the admin squad, which shot the match on Wednesday. And this is something that I know is being done at some matches. And it's basically a way where you typically it's the RMs, the stats folks, a few other folks, maybe the chrono crew, just a few folks that won't be necessarily working stages during the match. And you run them through as a squad. And the goal is to basically debug the stages by actually having a few people run through them in a scenario where if there's a problem with a stage, you can actually call someone, get them to fix it while you jump to the next stage and then come back, something like that. Obviously, if you're on staff day, like I think we had 7 or 8 staff squads, you get backups. And so if you can solve those things with one squad kind of jumping around between the stages as problems are discovered and either fixing them on the spot or getting, someone from the build crew or the quartermaster to come and fix it. It's a reasonable idea, and I think it worked out well for us. But originally we were going to be shooting on the admin day as sort of guinea pig testing the stages, but there was just so much that was still left to do before we were even really able to shoot that we ended up continuing just to work through Wednesday and then shooting with staff on Thursday, which I would definitely love to find a better way for the staff to shoot the match, because 12 stages self-ROing in a single day is a lot. It sucked. It definitely sucked. And yeah, I would love to look at other options for that's a little easier on the staff, but it seems like everybody pulled together and made it work, which is great. And then once the staff all shot on Thursday, and then Friday was an all-day set of competitors with a lunch break in the middle. I think we actually had 9 filled, which was nice. We had a little bit of gap between some of the squads, so we had a little bit of slack, so we could let the stage crews get in a rhythm, kind of get used to running shooters. But we had, instead of having a bunch of small squads, we had more larger squads, and so they got used to kind of running a whole squad at a time. And so that worked well. Like I said, all the stage crews, this was a staff reset match, so all the stage crews had Friday to kind of really figure out their flow and how they were going to divvy up the stage and how they were going to score it and reset it. And then Saturday was the real intense kind of big show where we started early, and we kept something that had been done in from past Area 6 matches, which I think is an interesting hybrid, where you start with 12 squads Saturday morning, and 6 of them will stop at lunch and then finish the rest of the match Sunday morning. And the other 6 will keep shooting all the way through. And then you have 6 squads that start shooting at lunch on Saturday afternoon, shoot 6 stages Saturday afternoon, and then between the 2 groups of 6 squads that shot a half day Saturday, they all shoot another half day Sunday. So basically you have 6 squads on Saturday that shoot all the way through for the people that just want to shoot it, get done, and go home. And then for the people that want to try and break up the match to, maximize their stamina and their performance, you have that option as well. So it's a pretty interesting hybrid where people can kind of choose how much time they want to dedicate to the match. Do they want to try and shoot it all in one day and just go home, which was also an option on Friday, or do they want to take the extra time and try and maximize their performance? So for that reason, we kept that schedule, and I'm reasonably happy with it. There are some things that obviously I would like to tweak about it, but I don't regret doing that at all. And it was a good setup. But that one, period where something backed up and you had morning squads running late into the afternoon, having to skip the lunch break, that things would get bad. But luckily we didn't have anything like that. We were basically on schedule the whole time. Our squad matrix was accurate. Our schedules were accurate. And so we were we were in good shape schedule wise for Saturday, so everything flowed well there. We started on time Sunday morning, finished on time, and then had the match torn down within about an hour, thanks to all the staff sticking around and pitching in. And many hands make light work, so it really was not a terrible teardown once we got everything loaded on the trailers from the far bays and then brought over and unloaded on the connexes. And yeah, that was it. So by Sunday at about 4:30, all the staff were on the road. We hung around, a little bit longer, doing some cleanup, putting the golf carts away, and then we were on the road by 5, which was good because we had 2 kids who didn't really get to nap that day, and we had a 5-hour with stops, a 5-hour drive home. So we ended up rolling into home around 10:30 Sunday night, which getting up for work the next day was interesting, but we kind of knew that going in. That was the plan, is we would leave on Saturday and come back the following Sunday and be gone for 8 days. But in that whole week, the whole match got done. And yeah, I couldn't be happier with how that all went. So as for things that generally went well, I think certainly the biggest one that has to be mentioned is just the weather. So we got lucky. The highs were right around 90 degrees most days, where it easily could have been 95, 96, 98 degrees in late August in upstate South Carolina. So the weather could have been quite a lot hotter, and it wasn't. We did not get a drop of rain the whole match, which that was probably the thing that I was sweating the most. And that is mostly because in the US, waterproof IPSC targets have become basically unobtainable. There's one company that I know of, CHL Targets, that makes a target they bill as waterproof. I've seen some tests of those, and basically the face of them has a waxy coating on them that's waterproof, but the top of the target, where the corrugations of the cardboard are open to falling water, are not really sealed. And so once the water starts to get into the corrugations, they still start to curl over. So they're better than plain cardboard, but they are not waterproof to the same level as, say, the double alpha waterproof targets that had kind of become the gold standard for us here in the US. And for whatever reason, double alpha has stopped making those, at least for the IPSC target style. And that was what all the stages, that was the plan, to just standardize on IPSC targets for this whole match. And so we had a backup plan where we had a strategic reserve of waterproof targets that we could distribute and put up on stages if needed. But luckily, from pretty much the time we got to Belton until we got out of there was no rain in the forecast. There was, I think, Saturday, Sunday, one day early on, we got a bit of a rainstorm, but it was before we'd hung any cardboard, and that was it. And it actually ended up getting pretty dusty by the end of it, and that was definitely not ideal, in the sense where even just slowly rolling on a golf cart, if you were rolled up to a stage, it just have a plume of dust following you, which I really felt bad about. But that is, I think, a small price to pay for a match that ended up being rain-free. Now, we had bags. If we'd needed to bag targets, we could have. Like I said, we had the backup plan with the waterproof targets, but we didn't end up needing them. And yeah, hopefully we can, somebody, whether it's CHL, can start sealing the top of their targets, or somebody else can start importing some better waterproof targets, or somebody can start making better, some really usable waterproof IPSC targets. That would be nice, but that was not something that we could change on the time scale of this match. So I was really sweating the rain, and then obviously if a hurricane came right up the middle, that would have completely destroyed the match. And so that, I was worried about that. We very much lucked out on that. The other concern, like I mentioned with Belton, the bays are nice, but they are very spread out. And so we had planned from the very beginning to have multiple 6-person golf carts just shuttling people back and forth constantly. There were sort of 2 really long moves. So the move from 12 all the way back to 1 was the longest move. And then there were some shorter ones in there. And our plan was just to have 5 of those shuttles running at all times. And as far as I know, that worked. We had them on the radio. I heard calls now and then for shuttle to stage 5 or shuttle to stage 12, and presumably they rebalanced and people got moved around. So hopefully from what I was seeing, that was working. Hopefully everybody felt like that was at least moderately successful. Certainly would have been a very, very different match without that. We would have probably had to reserve a whole squad segment just for people to make the long walk from stage 12 to stage 1. But because of the shuttles, we try to keep things moving and also ferry people from the competitor parking lot, which was all the way at one end of the range, to the various bays. And yeah, certainly without those shuttles, that the match would have been completely sunk. The parking lot was also a bit of an unknown quantity, so it had always been enough parking for the competitors at a 9 or 10 stage South Carolina section match, but especially with having 12 stages and then having, especially on Saturday, having the morning shooters and the afternoon shooters on the range at the same time around lunchtime, I was definitely sweating if we'd have enough room for everyone to park, because that lot is not limitless. And as it happened, we just barely snuck it in. I was parking cars on some of the ranges just to make a little bit of space at the very end, but then once some of the morning competitors started leaving, I knew we were in the clear, so we got lucky on that one. That one went well. If I could go back and do it again, I'd probably try and put up some ropes and whatnot to try and guide people where to park a little more densely, and we could have fit more people in the lot. But you know, there's only so many things you can do in the day, and like I said, we ended up getting away with that one, so that went well. We didn't have any arbitrations. We didn't have any stages get challenged or thrown out, which was definitely a blessing. One thing that I deliberately did to try and avoid that was just to keep target changes very simple. We standardized on 4 patterns of hardcover, basically a low hardcover, a tuxedo, and then just basically a left and a right. And so it would be pretty hard to mix up 2 similar hardcover patterns, which is something that I know has gotten stages tossed in the past. So we try to keep it very simple, and on each stage only use at most 2 of the patterns, generally speaking, so that each stage didn't have a lot of confusing patterns to mix up, that kind of thing. So yeah, no issues with the stages in terms of being challenged or thrown out. And we ended up having plenty of staff. We were actually overstaffed going into the match about 4 or 6 weeks out. But as happens, and we pretty much expect this, we ended up having a number of people basically say, plans change, I'm not going to be able to make it, I'm not going to be able to work the match. And we had to, there were some last minute reassignments, which I think, you know, some people were, to some degree, they had been seeing the staffing spreadsheet and may have been looking forward to working with a particular crew, but so we did have to move people around, but we had enough people, everything kept flowing, and we were able to accommodate all the various changes and needs of the staff. So again, completely thankful and humbled by the number of people willing to come out and work this match and make it a success. And I actually had more in my notes for this episode, but we're already right at the time I want to cut it off, so I will save my discussion of how I shot this match, which did not turn out the way I was expecting. Little foreshadowing there for you. I'll save that for the next episode, as well as the other bullet points that I had. I did want to go ahead and just follow up on some discussion that I've been seeing online. So I'm recording this the week after the match, but we just had a board meeting on Monday. So I got back, like I said, 10:30 at night on the Sunday, worked all day, and then we had a board meeting at 7 p.m. Eastern that Monday right after the match ended. And I'm without a question behind on a bunch of things on rules committee and bylaws committee and discipline committee matters. I'm still catching up on all those that it kind of fell by the wayside, anything that wasn't completely urgent. So I'm still catching up on a lot of that. But one of the things that happened at that meeting as a part of the live streamed portion was some discussion of a bylaws change to potentially give the board the ability to reassign certain roles that the bylaws appoint to the president. And there was some discussion about, okay, why is this a part of a meeting if we're not voting on it? The story there is that the board had agreed that we wanted to vote on that bylaw at this meeting, and we had requested per the bylaws that the text of that bylaw change be included with the agenda when it was sent out, and that was not done. The president refused to include those the bylaw changes and the subsidiary motions coming out of it in the agenda, and so that ended up basically delaying the whole process by 2 weeks. Now, obviously, we'll just vote on it at the next meeting, and as a board, we wanted to studiously make sure that we were following the bylaws, not just ignoring them when it was inconvenient. And so, although all of us wanted to go ahead and move forward with this, we were delayed by that, by the control of the president over the agenda. But here we are. The text should be included with the next agenda, hopefully. And then we will be voting on that in 2 weeks at the first board meeting of September, which will be on the second Monday. So just wanted to clarify that a little bit, that's what's going on there. The goal is to give the board some intermediary steps to be able to try and address issues that we're seeing with certain roles that are assigned to the president, and without just having to go straight to removing him and putting in someone else, or having, obviously the current vice president is Russell Fortney. If the president's removed, he immediately becomes acting president. This is another discussion that I kind of hope we don't have to have, but we may end up having, which is, I don't think, in my reading of the bylaws, the way that it's been interpreted in the past is when the president's removed, the vice president becomes president and stops being the area director. My reading of the bylaws is that in that case, the vice president continues to be an area director, but is the designated acting interim president until a new president is elected. I don't think that the area director vacates their area directorship and becomes president instead. But that is the precedent that's been set during the two previous removals of the president. But I do not think that's a precedent that is a precedent that we should continue, because I think if you read the bylaws, it doesn't say that the vice president becomes president. It's just they act as interim president. So we'll see if that becomes necessary to hash out, but that is what's going on with that proposed 7.9 bylaw around giving the board the ability to reassign certain duties that the bylaws give to the president. So that's the goal, is to give us the ability to be more incremental and not just have to basically only have one nuclear option of just removing the president. So we will see how that unfolds in the weeks to come, but that's what's going on there. Well, that wraps up this episode of Short Course. If you want to get in touch with me, my email is ben@berryshooting.com. Talk to you next time.